from PRX.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and friends beyond the binary. It's time for the podcasters that just wondered why they don't make mittens for feet and then quickly realized that they're, that's almost what socks are. You say to get a second pair of socks or thick socks. But you know what? The feeling I'm going for this podcast is a feeling. If there was mittens for feet, it would be... the spirit of mittens, feet mittens, will be captured by this podcast, just like Charlie captured those kitten mittens. It's time for Sleep With Me, the podcast that puts you to sleep. Sleep With Me podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this episode today. Smart choice. Make another smart choice with Auto Quote Explorer to compare rates from multiple car insurance companies all at once. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. All right, everybody, it's time to talk about tonight's sponsor, ZocDoc. You know that feeling when you walk out of a doctor's office and you think, wow, I feel so much better now. They really listened to me. They really explained to me what was going on. I felt heard. I felt seen. The right doctor can make you feel lighter, clearer, gives you hope everything's going to be all right. And I had that kind of relationship with my doctor in California. I felt like he listened to me. It felt like he took his time with me. But unfortunately, I moved all the way across the country. I'm in a whole new system now. But guess what? You can find those kind of doctors that make you feel good, that really listen on ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free app and website that helps you find and book high-quality in-network doctors so you can find someone you love. We're talking about booking in-network appointments with over 150,000 providers across all 50 states. Whether you're looking for dermatology, dentistry, primary care, eye care, or one of the other 200-plus specialties offered on ZocDoc, you could easily search for specialty or symptom to build the care team that's right for you. View thousands of verified patient reviews to give you a real sense of who your doctor is. Maybe they don't like small talk, or maybe you root for the same sports team. Whatever it is, you can feel confident that you can book with a doctor you know you'll love. And here's the thing I'm finding here of why ZocDoc is so much better. Because the doctors on ZocDoc are available. Every time I ask somebody in person here about their primary care physician or their dentist, they say, oh, they're not taking new patients. But with ZocDoc, I don't have to worry about that feeling. I can find a doctor I like, and then I can book an appointment with them. And that's one of the reasons I love ZocDoc, and you should check it out, too. Stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/sleep to find and instantly book a doctor you love today. That's ZocDoc.com/sleep. ZocDoc.com/sleep. Thanks, ZocDoc, for sponsoring this message. All right, everybody, we're playing Don't Support the Show. This one is a little bit different. Gene, can you take it away? Yeah, Scooter, that's my line. We're playing Don't Support the Show. But this one's a bit different, Scooter. The winner is people who already support the show. You shouldn't be hearing these messages. So you shouldn't support the show twice, right? And you're a part of something incredibly amazing, but we want to make sure you get your bonus content set up because Sleep With Me Plus is designed with super listeners in mind, and we're so glad you're a part of this thing. But you don't need to listen to these messages from Jeans. If you want to, we'll do something fun on YouTube or Sleep With Me Plus separate from this. Because if you support the show, you may be a person that falls asleep fast or listens all night long, listens episode after episode. You have very specific preferences for the show. And this problem, listen to Jeans might not be your thing. So we want to make sure you have that ad-free episode, story-only episodes, whatever it is, set up. So go to sleepwithmepodcast.com/plus and log in. And if you need help, reach out for support. You're all, everybody here listening is winners. Thanks, Gene. Gene, how do you think this is going to go? Scooter, I think it's a well-intentioned thing. And I'm glad to be, Scooter,
I didn't exist before this, and now I have a job. Thanks, Gene. You really are, you really are good. Like, it's too bad, Scooter, don't remind me that this isn't a real game show. Don't support the show. Yeah, I can hear everybody saying along with you, Gene. So thanks, Gene. Thanks, everybody. And the reason we're doing this in fun and then more calm terms, other parts of the show, is so you know you're welcome here, that it's good news. It's good you're here. I'm here to bring you sleepy joy, comfort, and delight in the deep, dark night. And I'm trying to mix up and change up what I'm doing so I can remind you I'm glad you're here. Thanks, Gene. Thanks, everybody. I love making the show for you. And people love supporting it for not just their style listening, but your style listening too. Your comfort in the deep, dark night. Thanks. Oh, Mystery Bard, a lot of people help out on our show. Who are they?
Posty poster son sounds like an earful. Wrote the theme song. Edits episodes. Carl W. the legend. Also edits episodes. Ashley, Kenny, Scotty, Jennifer. Runner. Eric and the team at Astound are on the website. I am the Mystery Bard. I do the lullabies, yeah. I do commissions at jonathanmann.net. I'll write a song for you. Any reason at all. You can tell me the story and I'll make it personal. You see the kindness shine straight on through when the listeners form their own Facebook group. Keith, Stacy, Sarah, Julie, and Jennifer. These are your narrators. Get support dear Scooter on Patreon. Buy the merch and support the sponsors. You can find anything you want at sleepwithmepodcast.com. And we're so proud that we could dance. Rusty Biscuit, Lois, Anna like banana. Leah does the transcripts.
Thanks, Mystery Bard. And one of the ways to support the show and support your good sleep, if you listen to Sleep With Me or other sleep podcasts or other sleep audios, to get yourself a pair of Sleep With Me branded sleep phones. And the only way you can get those is if you go to sleepwithmepodcast.com/sleepphones and use our code SLEEPWITHME at checkout to save $5 off your order. That's sleepwithmepodcast.com/sleepphones. The most comfortable way to listen to Sleep With Me, and use Sleep With Me, one word, at checkout. Thanks, everybody. And what do you say we get on with the show?
Hey, are you all night tossing, turning, mind racing, trouble getting to sleep, trouble staying asleep? Well, welcome. This is Sleep With Me, the podcast that puts you to sleep. We do it a bedtime story. All you need to do is get in bed, turn out the lights, and press play. I'm going to do the rest. What I'm going to attempt to do is create a safe place where you could set aside whatever's keeping you awake, whether it's thoughts, feelings that are coming up, physical sensations, changes in routine or travel, work schedule, or stuff like past, present, or future thoughts. Did I say that? Because that's definitely what does me. To turn for the thingamajig. Hardens the old pillow, as we say around here. I mean, I've never said that till now, but it's time for sleep. Did I say it's time for sleep? How's the episode? All you need to do is get in bed, turn out the lights, press play. I'm going to do the rest. What I'm going to do is create a safe place where you set aside. Oh, I'm going to try to create a safe place to distract you from whatever's keeping you up. I'm going to send my voice across the deep, dark night. I'm going to use lulling, soothing, creaky, dulcet tones, pointless meanders. I'll be distracted. I'll go off on goose chases, and my goose will not be gotten because the phrase is getting the goat. Getting the goat sounds like you won something. I guess if somebody got your goat, as they said, if someone got my goose, I wouldn't be happy about it. But if let's come back to that. That's another, collection of words we could explore. But really, I'm here to be your friend, to keep you company. If you're new, to earn your trust, to say, what is this thing? Who is this strange person? And yeah, I'm here to play the role of your boar friend, your boar bae, your boar cuz, your boar sib. Your partner in the deep, dark night, if you want to get, if you want to come up with something new, your bore partner. And what I propose to do, if you're new, here's a few things. I'm going to try to put you to sleep with lulling, soothing tones and pointless meanders in a bedtime story. of bare coherence. Maybe. And you don't need to listen to it. You can only barely pay attention or kind of pay attention, or you can pay attention. I'll be here for the whole time. You're also under no pressure to fall asleep because the shows are about an hour, so you have plenty of time. And I'll be here talking and wondering and trying to remember what I was going to talk about. I don't know. I thought I said something. Did I say something about naked? I said naked something, but it was not or I said bear something. But then I was thinking about getting a goat. Structurally, the show, if you're new, it starts off with about 4 minutes of business. That's how we keep the show free, is the sponsors and listener support. And then we have some business between the intro and the story. What was my other point? I already forgot. It's the intro and the story. Oh, so structurally show. It starts off with a few minutes of business. Then there's an intro, which I'm in. That's about 12 to 14 minutes. It's a show within a show to get you ready for bed. You know, you could brush your teeth during it. You won't miss too much. Or you could get, start puffing the pillows, calling the pets in or saying, hey, get out of my bed, pets. You could get comfortable. You could turn out the lights at that point if you've already, but some people turn out the lights and press play. I have been saying that for like 600 episodes, so it's kind of worn in. Even though people, every once in a while, somebody email me and say, hey, shouldn't you press play and turn out the lights? I say, well, it's too late. That pathway is worn. You can't do anything about that. But the intro is about 14 minutes of me demonstrating my qualifications for making a senseless sleep podcast. And to say, like, after 2 or 3 intros, you say, oh, okay, now I get it. Scoots has been there. Yeah, I've been there sleepless, tossing and turning ever since 5th grade. My thinker's been overdoing it, working overtime, of thinking of stuff and calculating stuff to just keep me up. I say, hey, why don't you think about this? Here's an unpleasant thought you could think about for the next few hours. And I say, thanks, I just want to go to bed. Well, how about this unpleasant memory? Oh, remember this memory? Well, let's contrast it with, and I say, okay, well, I just want to go to bed, please. And the only thing that I found that helped me was Dr. Demento, the radio show, Weird Al, and a collection of comedy songs. Never put me to sleep, but it took my mind off of that rigmarole. So I'm here to take your mind off stuff, but then you say, well, this is not he's no Weird Al. He's got the weird part down, but he doesn't have a sense of the polka or any of that other stuff, or that beautiful hair, or those nice shirts, or all the other trappings of being Weird Al. So, yeah, you could say, well, I'm comfortable falling asleep. And I'd say I'm comfortable with that, too. So that's the intro. And then there's a bedtime story. Tonight will be kind of a trending bedtime story about skywriting. Barely. About the skywriting doesn't happen until, I don't know when it happens. More me talking on a CB. So I'll be here. I'll be here for like an hour, and then the show ends with some thank yous. So that's the structure of the show. Like I said, you don't really need to listen, but you can, because if you can't sleep, I'm here till the very end to keep you company. But you say, like, when you think about storytelling, a lot of times people say that the antagonist is the hero of their own story. When you have a movie or like a book or even a podcast, a lot of times the antagonist, they view themselves as the hero, their version of it. And a while ago, I did an opening intro about if my goose got gotten. I didn't realize it was getting your goat. I thought it was getting your goose. And I said, please don't do that. Don't go out in the world and get people's gooses or goats now, I'll say, because it would be a bummer. If you had a goose and it got gotten, or a goat, you'd say, man, you wouldn't even say that stinks. I'm sure you'd use much more colorful language. And you'd want your goose back. And I even used the thing, I said, some super rich person would even miss their goose or their geeses. But let's flip the script, as they say, and imagine a world where it's okay and someone has gotten a goat, a young person, maybe they're in middle school, and they get home. And they say, just like just like a parallel world where kids would in science fairs and art fairs and whatever the heck, it's sports stuff, they get more than the participation thing. They say this one's for you're a go-getter, chasing that ball around and catching that stuff. Oof, you're like, when kids get home from that kind of stuff and they say, look here, it's third place in the art fair. And you always say first place in my heart. That's the right thing to say, by the way, or some sort of version of that. You keep your art opinions for the internet or whatever. But let's pretend we live in a world where we're raising our children to go get other people's goats. Just pretend. It's a thought experiment. And this child comes home and they've gotten someone's goat or a goose. If you prefer, you got their goose or you got their goats. And imagine the joy of the child coming in and they say, Mama, Papa, I've gotten the goat. Doesn't that feel good? Isn't that empowering? In a reverse world, obviously, you say, okay, well, you shouldn't be going out. In our world, you say, don't go out there and get anybody's goat or goose. Metaphorically, figuratively, or definitely not literally. In this world, there's a different value system, and everyone would say, yippee, 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 you've gotten a goat. Congrats, Junior. What a lass you are. You've gotten a goat. Great job. And everyone maybe would dance around, and they say, maybe sing a song or chant, you've gotten a goat. So something to that, like the chorus would be, maybe, something where you shake your hips, like a conga line about getting the goat. Even the goat would be in the conga line. And in this world, it's even more special because then the goat probably gets to live in luxury. So they all carry it up to the master bedroom, which is reserved just for when the goat is gotten. And maybe it's good luck or something. Like people out there in the alternative world, they say, my goat got gotten. I don't know where the heck it went. I just am like a frowny face emoji. And if they only knew that in this world, the gotten goat is, in bed. They say in this world, we have 400 channels of goat-based entertainment. Directed programming for goats, by goats, about goats, and even a couple zygotes, if you don't mind me throwing in, and then the unfunny comedy channel. That'll get your goats. A game show, goat game shows, and, anything else the goats are into. They might say, well, actually, I like Star Trek. But we got 4 different channels of Star Trek, my dear goats. Can I wax your horns or oil? Would you prefer me to wax your horns or oil them? Well, you only have nubs? Same thing. I'd be more than pleased. We have Furminators for dogs, and we have... we actually here in our house, we think you'd like to be rubbed with a Brillo pad because you're so Brillo-y. Oh, my sweet, sweet goats. We're so glad we've gotten you. And we're going to massage your hooves because we know you've been, hooving around. We're going to rub your cloven feet with cloves. If you have cloven feet, I don't, they say, well, that's the difference between a goat and a ram, by the way, Scoots. And I'd say, well, la-di-da. You got my goats. So that would be wonderful. And you'd be filled, that kid would be, I think it's imbuient or whatever. I don't know what the word is, but when you feel buoyed, you feel good inside. You see, I got the goats. And now under our eaves is now a goat. That's, we're going to give it a good home. And it's going to live in luxury for the rest of its days. Yes, somewhere out there. We're the antagonists in the other world. Somebody's saying our goat got gotten. And you probably have a painting. You'd probably have another room, like with paintings of that family that did such a great job raising the goats. You'd leave things for them, like candles, and leave little treats for each member of the family for doing such a good job, raising the goat so it could be to the point where it got gotten, brought into your world, and, living the good life. The goat, living large, living a goatful life. Goat gotten and fancy free, as no one's ever said either. So what was my point? Oh, my point is I tend to go on tangents, and I tend to try to distract you. Just like it may take some trust building to get a goat, to get the goat, and then to get the gotten goat to accept a new life of, they say, well, we're gonna buff, I'm gonna buff your hooves now, goaty poo. The goat at first might be like, what in the heck? And you might say, well, just watch the tube. We got plenty of. You heard of Caesar Milan? Yeah, we got Caesar Milan and a herd of goats walking around together. Goat pack, they call it. And actually, it's called Goat Pack Milan in Milan with the goat pack. Walking around Milan. It's great. So just watch it. And I'll be here. And that would take the goat to say, yeah, I'm it's a little strange to live in a world where I'm treated like a queen or a king. But I guess I'm distracted by this TV show with a goat pack in Milan, and I'll get used to this. Maybe the goat would fall asleep watching that show. Maybe not. I don't know how action packed it would be. I don't know what they would do. Would they go shopping? I don't know. In a goat in this alternative goat world, the goats still have the reputation of like eating tin cans and stuff like that. I don't know. I guess I'll have to talk to the program director. But here's what I'll say to you, human, is did I take your mind off stuff? Did I distract you for a little bit? I hope I did. I make this show because I believe you deserve a good night's sleep. I can't talk clearly or think clearly. What I can do is be here. Because as I've said, I've been there. And I'd like to bring a little levity to bedtime. If there's a goat keeping you awake, I'd like to get that goat and get us distracted and say, hey, wow, look at me. It's a goat game show, the goat game show channel, the GGC or whatever channel. I don't know what we'll call it. But my main message is I'm glad you're here, and give the show a few tries. It takes a few tries for most people to, realize there's no making sense in any of this, but it's just here to help. It's not here, I'm not here to force anything on you or whatever. So give it a few tries and see if it helps. I work very hard, and I yearn and I strive to help you fall asleep. So I want to thank you for coming by. And before we get on with the show, here's, how we keep the show going.
All right, everybody, it's time to talk about tonight's sponsor, Helix. And you know where I was last night? So comfortable, and this morning, and I didn't want to get out of bed because I was so cozy, so comfortable. Yeah, of course, I was in my Helix mattress. And the amazing thing about my Helix is it fits my needs, my sleep preferences, how I like to feel in bed. Because I took the quiz over at helixsleep.com/sleep, and I got matched with a mattress. So of all the features I need to sleep cool and comfortable, all the support I need for when I'm sleeping on my side, when I'm sleeping on my stomach, to take good care of my back, and so I get a great night's sleep, and then I'm so comfortable. I'd like to take the day off and spend it in bed, especially on these cool winter nights. Holy moly. But what about you and your mattress? Do you think it's time for an upgrade to a mattress that gets you and what you need? What's going to make you comfortable? I think you deserve that, right? And you could take that Helix quiz. It matches you with the perfect mattress based on your personal preferences and sleep needs. It makes buying a mattress easy, and you do it in the comfort of your own home. And there's free shipping in the U.S. It comes straight to your door. And what an upgrade it's been, because I had to temporarily sleep on a mattress that was not a Helix. And now I look forward to going to bed every night, to getting cozy, pulling those blankets in and snuggling down in my Helix. I'm going to be comfortable all night long. So what about you? How about you take that quiz and you see what discount Helix has to offer right now? Go to helixsleep.com/sleep to see the latest offers for Sleep With Me listeners. That's helixsleep.com/sleep for current offers. Make sure you enter our show name after checkout so they know we sent you. That's helixsleep.com/sleep.
Hey, everybody, it's Scoots here. It's time for a trending episode. It's actually a Trending Tuesday episode for me. I'm recording it on a Tuesday. And you know what's in the trends internally is that recently I know I did an intro about a Skywriter. And I totally, like I said, I'm going to write a book about that. And then I forgot, of course, the book title. I filed it away in book titles I'll never remember. Which is like one of many Jeopardy categories about me, because, you know, that's what I'm about, is my ego's running the show. You know, things I'll take things I'm worried about for 500. Books I've never written and truly don't, well, I couldn't say truly don't attend to. I'm going to have to take a quibble. Alec, where do I take a quibble with, taking a quibble with Alec for 500, Alec? What is Alex? Was that a daily double? Thanks. What other Jeopardy categories would there be about me? I think that would be that was actually a category. I'll take that for 300, Alex. Other Jeopardy categories about me? Mostly they're like things I'm worried about, regrets, like I did you hear that episode, Alex? Alex, I know it, but I don't know it. I don't think it, I don't know why I can't remember it. But mostly because I would be embarrassed to call you Alex Trebek when it's Alec. So I just hedging my bets in case I'm on a show with categories about me. But yeah, one category would be books. What about release years for Gingerbread Press books I haven't written? That would be a category I could agree with you on. Monsieur Trebek. Yeah, like I could agree in that. I'd say 2026 would be the year I love plants. Year of plants and plant-based. Embrace, you know, that's no, what is, I'm sorry, I forgot what is, so I dropped the ball on that one. Anyway, I got to get out of here because I'm in the middle of a podcast intro, not an intro, podcast episode, or just has begun. Trending Twitter Tuesday episode, Alex. What is this moment right now? Exactly, 500. What is, I don't know, there was one about, one about the game, with Chutes and Ladders, but I can't remember what it was called. No, I've never done an episode, you appear in a lot of episodes, but I've never done an episode about Jeopardy, but I am in a bit of Jeopardy, because of that word. Have you listened to Weird Al's, Hamilton, thing? Because you wrote a song about you way back in the day. And, okay, I'll get back to, I don't think I'll be getting back to you, but, I gotta go. Oh boy, somebody you might as well put him in the OBE or whatever, put a crown on his head, because, anyway, so I'm back. Sorry about that, a little appearance on Jeopardy. But recently I talked about skywriting, a skywriter. I don't think it was called the Lonely Skywriter, because that's not enough, But, you know, sometimes they say when you put, watch what you, I think my Nana used to say this, watch what you put in the universe. Don't put that in, don't put too much of that in the universe. She might have been talking about soda in my glass, but she might have been putting universal energy into the universe too. And I said, yeah, Nana, I'm putting soda-based, energy in the universe. But then, so this is kind of like a Travel Tuesday, Trending Tuesday episode, because I was out walking, as so many of my episodes start. And I was walking on the waterfront, I was strolling with purpose. I stroll with purpose, even though I don't have a purpose, believe it or not, even if I didn't know I was going. And then I heard somebody calling to me, hey, and I said, that's the least effective way to get my attention. I mean, I'll know you're there. And I said, just keep your eyes straight ahead, Scoots. nothing good ever came out of hay. For you never, had any rolls in the hay. And you've never made hay while the sun is shining. And so the only thing you could do is eat hay like a horse. So just keep moving like a horse. You keep trotting. But then they said, hey, podcaster. And I couldn't help it because it's so rare. I shot my head in that direction. And I saw what could only be described as a woman having a picnic, except that she also had aviator glasses on, a white scarf, a silk scarf, as I would later learn, and that kind of thing, like a leather a pilot's cap, or I don't know what you call it, with the sunglasses that come down, or the goggles. I guess flight goggles is what they're technically called. And a flight suit matching the scarf, which could also, I said later, I'd say those could double as pajamas. I said, yeah, if I didn't have my clothes on underneath. And I said, oh boy, we'll slow it down here. But I was just kidding anyway. But they could have, I guess this zipper, this is a tangent, but has any pajamas, I guess, those kids' pajamas have zippers. And I know there's grown-up onesies nowadays, so those have zippers, too. They do have the zipper thing where it folds down, and then you put the little button thing over the zipper. So, one, it doesn't unzip, and two, you don't poke anything with the zipper thingamajig. Anyway, so this was a woman having a picnic, ostensibly dressed as a pilot. And I said, are you talking, I did the old, do you mean me? And she said, yeah, podcaster, get over here. And I said, what podcaster perchance do you think I am? And she said, you're the dull one. We need to talk. And I said, would a Carole King send you? And she gave me a knowing smile. And I said, okay. And she had a picnic, and she said, I figured I'd introduce myself with a picnic and break the ice, literally. And then she started breaking up ice into 2 glasses, had some bubbly water. That was a good move for a picnic, I guess, because then the water was ice cold. And she had one of my favorite dishes for picnics, fried chicken with hot sauce that you could put on it, cold. And brie and baguettes. And so my guard was down right away. Even my hay guard was down, clearly, because I sat down on this blanket. And we started, she said, let's eat first, and then we'll talk. And I said, well, I'm good at eating, not good at talking. I'm good at rambling, but not conversation anyway. So, I said, well, why don't I said, it'd be great if you could explain to me why you called me, like what's happening here while I eat, and you could eat in between bites. That way I have the food to deflect my uncomfortableness, and then we'll establish some rapport, and then we'll move on. And she said, fair enough. And they said, are you going to, how do you eat with a flight suit on? I said, how are you going to keep that? And then the breeze picked up and flapped her scarf behind her. And I said, well, that's eerie a little bit. And she said, I'd rather just eat as well. And I said, okay, there goes my big plans. And so we ate in mostly silence until I said, okay, Scooch, come on, you've been working on your people skills. And I said, do you listen to the podcast? And she held up her hand like that was a question not to be answered. And I said, because I had this episode recently where I was talking about sipping broth. It's a new invention. Well, it's actually just a repurposing of broth, or bouillon, whatever the other one's called, stock. And I guess it would be better as like a pop-up restaurant. Hopefully, if somebody steals the idea, they at least give me a complimentary visit for whatever 4 cents of broth. But it's where you go and you sit and you sip broth. Or, you could buy it and then heat it up and sip it. A bit like tea. but not as a soup. Like I said, I think I was thinking instead of cocktail hour, you'd have broth time. Yeah. Yeah, that was one of my ideas. Whoa, what is that? Well, I was just wondering if we're going to have dessert, because they also had an episode, and I was watching her body language the whole time to see if she was a listener or not. Yeah, I'll be honest, most listeners sleep through the show, but even then, something about her body language told me that she didn't, even get that broth talk would be something that would come. I said, oh, yeah, because I said broth talk, the podcast about broth and things interesting to brothers. And she didn't get that. It was a veiled reference to, podcast about podcasting or screenwriting and things interesting to screenwriters. So I said, okay. And I said, do you know what my favorite broth to sip is? It's pho or whatever. And she didn't say anything. So I said, okay, well, then I started talking about dessert. Sorry, I got mixed up about getting, this is what happened there too. But I said, I think I was thinking about a cooking show where kids cook in the back of a car. I think it was called Country Cooking. But I thought I had thought of a dessert show too. But I can't remember it right now. But I did think of it like the show. They just I guess they could take one of those kids cooking shows and just take it on the road, and they make the kids cook. Oh, and then one of my parts of my brain said bad idea, so I didn't do that. So that was never a show. But I thought I had some other ideas. So is there any dessert? And she said, yeah, we have ding dongs. And I said, holy moly. I said 1 pack to split one each. She said correct. And I said, fair enough. And we sat and we ate the ding dongs. And she said, I am here about a podcast intro. I know you were talking about skywriters recently. And I happen to be a skywriter. And I said, oh boy, synchronicity is more than the title of a Police album. And she said, yeah, she goes, I can't talk about how I got here, how I found you. I said, probably my phone, right? You just probably, he said, they tracks me and she said, yeah, more or less. I said, Carole King in my phone. And she said, don't worry about who my, and I said, okay, well, let's get to the gusto then. And now, because I'm hopped up on a little sugar from this ding dong and a tiny bit of caffeine and the chocolate, I said, tell me more. You're a skywriter, and she goes, and I'm a bit down. And I said, I can't even think of the last time I saw any skywriting. And she said, exactly. And I said, I can remember once upon a time, every 4 or 5 years seeing skywriting, at least for a few minutes. And now, no more. And she said, yeah, she goes, the skywriting business has been down for decades. And then I kind of stopped listening because there was these seagulls, and I said, they better not come bug me. So I was watching them. But I'm pretty sure if I could recount what she said, my mother was a skywriter. My father was a copywriter. Or maybe something was a typewriter. I don't know. But some sort of family history, why she's dedicated to skywriting. And I said, oh, that's great. I said, can we move to another, I said, while you're telling me this, because there's those seagulls over there. I worry about them. I don't have a flight cap. And she said, no, I need help. I'm a lonely skywriter. I'm a skywriter with nothing to write. And something about that. And maybe it was that there was a seagull call right at the beginning and right at the end. And she said, I'm a skywriter with nothing to write. And it was, I don't know if it was heart-wrenching. It was hard awakening, to be honest. I said, okay, well, there's a call to adventure. I don't need Joseph Campbell to frickin' tell me that one. And I said, I could give you something to write. But then she kind of went into the economics of it. And I said, oh, boy. And I said, here's a question. Why you gotta, why you only gonna use white smoke? How come, I said, there was your biggest mistake is not whatever they call that when you create, you keep improving. And she was going to interrupt me. I said, okay, let me just go on my tirade and I get it off my chest. I said, one, we should have had multicolor skywriting years ago. Two, if it exists, I don't know about it. Just I said, then you could have put sparkles in there. Then you could have put fireworks in there, or at least like sparklers or sparkly stuff. I said, three, I realized there's probably some sort of regulations or something. I said, but I'm here to help. I don't need the whole history of skywriting. And I said, one more thing. The last few times I have seen skywriting, it is STINK, stunk, with a U. Because it's like something letting out little dots instead of a constant stream. And no, like, let the wind do the work for the letters. Wrong. To me, skywriting is a biplane, or at least some kind of thing. I said, what was up with I said, that was the end. I said that, and she told me the greatest tale of is skywriting. She talked about regulation. I was still fixated in the seagulls, so I may have filled in some fiction here. But she said, yeah, it was a fix to ruin skywriting. Her father, was that the typewriter or the copywriter? With some rivalry, bought up all skywriting. Kind of like it was same. I think this comes up every 80 episodes, like the plot of Roger Rabbit, but with skywriting. Which I think it was. So basically, in cover your ears, if you're a part of any oligarchy or whatever. Or aristocrat, what are those called? Aristocracy? Whatever. If you're aristocrat or aristocrat, like the billboard barons, they bought up all the skywriting. And they were in cahoots with those blimps. Because you say, hey, what happened to all the flying of the signs? That barely ever happens anymore. Nothing. I need more advertising when I'm outside. Like in a park, and especially a slow developing one. So that's what happened with that, is that if they did that, then they said, okay, we're going to relaunch the skywriting. This was like 2013 or something, with the dot skywriting, which if you've seen it, which you probably have, because it's the only, unless you live in some sort of area with a bespoke skywriter, you've seen it. It's just like a jet flies, and it does the top of all the letters. And I said, when did they throw out cursive? That's another big mistake. And I said, as soon as they lost the romance of skywriting. And she said, well, this is all where I need your help. And I guess that's when I should have been paying more attention. But I knew this was more of a spiritual quest anyway, because Carole King was involved. But she wasn't involved on my end, which meant I was on my own. So I probably should have been listening. But basically, that skywriting was, the people said skywriting over it. And I said, wait a second. I said, you said, hey, podcaster. And now I'm seeing the parallels of podcasting and skywriting. And I said, it's not as big a leap as you might think. One is like a form of more or less direct. I said, it's strange that skywriting is kind of a direct form of communication. Or I said, well, I thought there was a parallel in there. The parallel between skywriting and podcasting is that like a lot of millennials and younger people haven't been exposed, just like long form audio. The radio kind of became just like the same 40 or 50 songs. And people hadn't been exposed unless they really dug deep to all these talking people on the radio. People haven't seen writing in the sky. And, even Rihanna knew like diamonds in the sky. She once sang. I said, I said, we're going to return. I said, we're going to fix this whole thing. And she said, well, she said, you know what, I got it. Thanks for lunch. I got it. And I said, no. My talking always undoes my, authority. He said, don't worry, I'm already coming up with a plan. And she said, what is your plan? And I said, well, it's a slow I said, first of all, we got to find some multicolored smoke. And she said, well, there's a regulation. And I said, okay, hold on with the regulation stuff. And she said, what do you mean? And I said, we're going to come over. I said, I just came up with another plan while I was going to tell you my plan. So now we have a 2-layered plan. And she said, what is it? And I said, he said, we need some sort of rebel, not you, that we could loop into this. And she said, I'm a rebel. She said, look at me. And I said, yeah, you do have a bit of Amelia in you. And I said, you're very poised, if you don't mind me saying so. And anyone that would go to a picnic in a flight suit is, I guess that is rebellious in some way. And she said, what are you thinking? I said, well, here's the thing. In order to save skywriting, just like in all of these tales, so many times, so well worn the path, you have to be prepared to say goodbye to skywriting forever. Just, if they make a movie, it's going to happen too. I said, but first you'll give up your, what brought you happiness in your regular life for skywriting. Then skywriting will be your only thing. And then, in order to save it, you'll have to give it up. I think that's how it works. But I said, are you willing to do that? And she said, no, you still have to establish some more authority before. I said, okay, fair enough. I said, let's get to the airport or airfield. And she said, well, we're not ready to fly yet. And I said, okay, I said, you know what? I got a great idea. And she said, what? And I said, today is, I think there's this big pitch day. I said, not too far away at the big university. Big U, I said, they call it, not here, but at Cal Berkeley, there's a big pitch day for grants. I read about it in the paper. And she says, what's a paper? And then we both had a laugh. I said, it'd be great if you had like one of those boat planes, and we could, because I said we were in San Francisco on Marina Green. And I said, it'd be great because we could it would take us like literally 5 minutes to get to Berkeley, where now it's going to take forever. And she said, I'll drive while you fill me in on the plan. I said, no. I said, my style of planning is more show up and solve everything. And she said, actually, I do have a plane, and it is parked nearby. And I said, let's do it. And this was my first ride in one of those boat planes, or whatever, pontoon plane. And I said, how come you don't name this thing like a boat? I said, this pontoon plane. And then she kept telling me the correct name, and marine aircraft, or so. I said, boring. I said, is this the same model that Indiana Jones got picked up in? Because it doesn't look the same. Hers was red. And she said, well, what would you call it? And I said, my first thing would be to call it Red Baron. But I said, you have to work some sort of aqua thing in there. So I don't know. Maybe I said not Aqua Velva, because if it was blue, I'd call it Aqua Velva. But I don't know. That doesn't really make you fly either. I don't know. Red pontoon, not good. And we got out, and she actually had to drive it as a boat, so we couldn't get in the air because she called, I don't know, 4141 breaker. And I said, can you get all the other CB channels in there? And she said, yeah. And I said, so not the FFA, not the ones that are going to, I said, she said, yeah, go down to this level. And I said, great. I said, this will save us some time. And I said, breaker, this is Red Baron here calling any lonely truckers out there in the middle of a drive looking to stretch their legs. looking to help someone rekindle their dreams. And at the same time, say goodbye to their dreams probably. And they, no one, of course, said it, came back. And then I said, breaker, 1-5, quit picking your nose out there, truckers. Get your fingers out of your noses. Two hands on the wheel, 10 and 2. This is Red Baron, and I'm watching out for you. Keep it driving through the night. Big wheels keep on turning. I'll check in soon. And then she said, what are you doing? I said, well, we're going to need some help here. And none of the truckers seem, I said, we're not really in a good, place where there's down-home truckers willing to help somebody down on their luck. And she said, I need to know more of your plan. And I said, here's the plan. Here's what you need to worry about. I said, first of all, parking this boat plane. And she said, don't worry. I got at the Berkeley Marina, I got whatever you call that, a spot to park. And she goes, that's where that's where my car's parked anyway. And I said, you have 2 cars, and 2 plane spots. I said, not being a skywriter. And she said, well, my dad was, like I said, a copywriter. So she goes, I'm living off his savings right now. And that's part of why my heart needs to soar. And I said, okay, well, we're on this. Don't worry. Don't you worry one bit. And she parked the plane, old Red Baron, in a spot, whatever those are called. I think they're not locks, but they're called, I think it's called a slip. We slipped right in there. And she said, what's the plan? And I said, here's the plan. He said, I just looked on my phone, and the pitch thing is until tomorrow, which is even better. And I said, you need to come up with a flight plan to be able to fly over the campus of Cal Berkeley tomorrow. And he said, like anytime between 10 and 2 p.m. And she said, what are we going to do? And I said, we're going to save skywriting as we know it, and we're going to reinvigorate or, get you forever banned from skywriting or, change the work. We're going to do, we're going to enact my plan. And she said it would help if I knew more about it. I said, here's the thing. I need you to run off to Safeway or an art supply store and get some kind of food coloring so you can color the smoke. And she goes, that's not how it works, but actually I have a warehouse in my house, so let's go there. And I said, I got to stay here. I need to use the CB all night. I got to keep an all-night watch for truckers and people on the long haul. And she said, what do we need truckers for to save skywriting? And I said, I just haven't had, I said, I'll figure it out. This is the tools that whatever Carol King or whatever spiritual forces that united us. I'm here to help you save skywriting. You go figure out what colors, you choose the colors of the smoke. Definitely put some whatever those things are called, some glitter in there. Maybe not, because then it'll fall and people will complain. But I said, just do your best. I'll be here talking to truckers. And she headed off. And I realized how impolite I had been. I hadn't even introduced myself. I guess when you're questing, and you might be listening and saying, Scoots doesn't know. And believe it or not, I actually have a plan. Yeah, but I guess I got distracted by the CB or the whatever radio. Now it's set to CB mode. So I hop back on the CB. And I said, breaker, 1-5, this is Red Baron here. Keeping your feet warm throughout the night. I'm going to be running my gums on this channel all night long. So it'll be easy listening all night here. Breaker 15. I think I supposed to say it because it's channel 15. And then someone said Heavens to Murgatroyd, but not in that, like in a much saltier language. And I said, okay, now I'm definitely saying it. And they said, okay, great news here. Just got a request in from like Heavens to Murgatroyd for me to ramble. And I got a request going out to, actually, everybody here on channel 15. I want to paint you a picture. Breaker, over. And then the one person, they said a couple more things. That only encourages me, though. And I said, thanks for the encouragement, everybody out there. I never got so many messages back. And I said, here, I was making stuff up between you and me, just to mess with the other one person on there. I said, Big Harry, thanks for letting me know. I'm going to tell you this story now tonight. Jane, Alice, thanks for getting back to me. Oh, boy, I'm glad your feet are warm, and this story is going to warm it even more. Carl, yeah, I'm here. Thanks for the support. Louis and Lorraine, glad that the two of you are sharing a cab this evening, and you're going to be sharing a story with me soon. Over. And the same person came back. But then other people said, there was some chatter. And I said, breaking in on the chatter. It's the Red Baron. And I want to tell you a story. I want those of you I know that out there on the highways and the byways of the world, behind the big rigs and the little rigs, and maybe even in your garage, listening in at home, wherever the roads may take you, you may remember a time, or you may have heard about a time when once there was writers in our sky. Maybe you have that one pure memory where the summer breeze was warm, the cola was sweet on your tongue, the ice cream was in your hand, and there in the sky was a buzzing, raising and lowering in pitch against the blue and the occasional cloud was a plane, and then out of the back of the plane came a jet of smoke. And you said to yourself, holy mackerel, and maybe the plane started with a couple test letters. But soon it became clear the plane was writing a message. And depending on the wind and depending on how good the Skywriter was and where you had to be, you may have saw if it was a happy birthday message or if it was a shop at Big Al's Market message. But it had you anticipating, it had you watching. And one day that all disappeared. And as you behind the big rigs of the world know, the world isn't as simple as the circles of a wheel, of the highways and the byways, of good folks patting one another on the back and saying, keep it up, keep that big wheel a-turning. Those of you out there know about restrooms that are out of order, metaphorically in this case, but maybe not even, because I'm wondering, I'm sitting here in my own borrowed big rig right now wondering where I'm going to have a step and take a deep breath, if you know what I'm saying. But once upon a time, there was writing in the sky, and between those good old days and now, the only good thing that's happened to the sky has been Rihanna. And that was just in our ears. It didn't touch our eyes. But maybe one day there will be someone, you could listen to Diamonds in the Sky while someone doesn't just write in the sky. They sculpt in the sky, or they calligraphize the sky. And I know this only works in movies, but breaker, if you can help, if you could spread the word, this is going to be free tomorrow in Berkeley, California. Yeah, there's going to be writing in the sky. And if you go to, whatever, Bowery Hall at 1 p.m. and cheer outside and chant what you see and let it affect you, let the nostalgia impact you and the skywriting impact you. That'll be a big yes, a big vote for yes for dreams. Breaker, out. And then just some people started chattering, and there was some talk about skywriting. The complaining person was still trying to complain, but they're drowned out. And then there was some confusion over what I was talking about, so then I went back on and tried to re-explain it 5 different ways. And I said, basically, if you love skywriting, let somebody know, or be there yourself at Berkeley's campus, especially in your big rigs, and feel free to park wherever. And but make sure you're there, wherever Bowery Hall, at the big pitch for whatever. I forgot. I didn't have to tell them that. That was just part of it. And then I fell asleep in the cab of the plane. And there was plenty of blankets in there, so I know my friend, she had slept there before. And then the next day she came and she brought coffee, and she said, "You slept here, eh?" And I said, "Yeah, I did." And I said, "How?" And she said, "I've been up all night." I said, "Me too, except for the parts where you found me when I was asleep. That part I was asleep for." And she said, "How'd it go last night?" And I said, "We'll see." I said, "We'll see if anybody believes in dreams anymore. But if anybody does, it's truckers or people, amateur CB people. I don't know what kind of." I said, maybe somehow that leaked out. I said, I called some of my friends and they taped it and put it on the internet. So hopefully that happened too. I believe Cher once said, if you believe in skywriting and love, you'll fill the sky with this is what you're going to do. Then I tried to inspire her, with words so bright. I really don't think, your writing could ever not be good enough, because I believe in writing in the sky. And she kind of looked at me dumbfounded. And I said, "By the way, I'm Scoots. I never caught your name." And she said it was Hannah. And I said, "But you like to go by AE, don't you?" Because I saw like a monogrammed initials on a leather case, but I didn't say that. And she said, "You're wise." And she said, "So what's the plan?" I said, "Well, you get up in that." I said, at 10 o'clock, I said, "You get up there in the sky and start writing." And she said, "Writing what?" And I said, "Well, I've written down some words for you to write." But I said, "My handwriting." I said, "You could always text me too." And she said, "What's the plan?" I said, "The plan is to make skywriting for you sustainable and to reawaken the world's love in skywriting." And I said, "That's been the plan all along, hasn't it?" And she said, "It is." I said, "Well, take your, I said, "What colors of skywriting do you have?" And she said, "Just you wait." And I said, "Well, I said, actually, I won't be, I'll be in." I said, "I'm going to have to." I said, "Okay, I guess I'll wait." So she started, just spinning the propeller or whatever. And I took her car, I headed to campus. And then on the way to campus, luckily there's this costume store, underground, down an alley, costume store, where they know me for my other adventures. And it was just sometimes if I have paid off my bills, they like me. So they showed up. I said, "I need a Music Man costume stat." And they said, "Dick Van Dyke Music Man?" And I said, I don't know. Was that who played them? Yeah, but the Music Man rhymes with pool. And a cane, one of those canes. I may be doing some tap dancing, so maybe put some tap dancing shoes together. And they said, "Okay." And they said, you got to sign the waiver that says you didn't rent this from us, because the last few times I said, yeah, give me unmarked costume, but for sure, untraceable costumes. That's the only thing I wear. And I was costumed as a Music Man, which I didn't know. So that needs a reboot to be. But it's just a snazzy outfit. It wasn't actually going as a music person. The Music Man, but I liked that whole get up and gave me some confidence. And I drove into Berkeley, and there was this big pitch fest going on for grants, particularly just all sorts of grants and those other things like to do the things when you're at school, like paid theses. And I don't know, all sorts of different things. And so I tapped my cane. I got on it always has a stage that's not usually used except for the start your granting and whatever, granting of grants. And I tapped my cane and stood on the stage and waited for attention. I crossed my fingers that the truck drivers everywhere were gathered around the Berkeley campus. They started swinging my cane. People, when they see that kind of thing, they wonder, okay, is that just a person, is that someone I should be making eye contact with or avoiding eye contact with? Or is it some sort of performer? Or is it someone that desperately desires attention and, via sleep podcast? And so I waited for the anticipation to build a little bit, and then I made sure the mic was on, and I tapped my cane again, and I flipped my cane around, I pointed to the sky, which was the ceiling of this big, giant room, kind of like a gymnasium, but it was called a hall. And I said, look at the sky, so empty, without a message, without a meaning, without anything but, nature's bounty of clouds and weather. The sky has not always been empty, though. And those of you among us that are the most curious, and then I heard somebody, like this woman in a very truckery voice say, skywriting. And I said, that's right. There's something that's been missing from the sky. Writing in the sky. And many of you might be too young to remember the days when it wasn't the Greek or Roman gods that were writing in the sky. And it wasn't your imagination projecting onto the clouds, but there would be a plane across the sky sending a message about a quinceañera or like a car sale. Or some other thing, like Happy 4th of July, maybe. And then the world changed, and big business got bigger, and our hearts got a little bit smaller. And the sky remained empty, except for occasional things you said, that's not as good as the nostalgia in my heart. Well, I'm here to tell all of you. Some of the brightest and most intelligent people in this room, that I'm here with a proposal, with a question, with an inquiry into the human condition in a search for answers of affect and effect, of cause, of pebbles in the water with the ripples slowly floating away. Now, I don't know if there's anybody here granting grants for those kind of things, but in my dreams there are. And you might say, what's this? Sometimes I can actually hold a room. And then, during this time, more and more truckers did start showing up and yelling, encouraging words. So, anybody that's not a fan of truckers, you can take that into your trucker cap and smoke it. And they were mostly yelling stuff about the sky and writing. And I said, I was thinking of a question one time that a student or a theologian or a philosopher might pose, that they might put it into a grant and package it up and find actionable items or whatever it is you look for, deliverables, impacts, and things you could quantify. Because we all know, while you could quantify the number of heartbeats in a minute, you can't quantify the beating of a heart. While you could theorize on the weight of a cloud, you can't weigh dreams. And then some trucker said, get on to it. And I said, yeah, you're right. And I said, what if one of these people working on their thesis, one of these people thinking about a broad university study, have you ever asked yourself what would happen to a community if wonderful words appeared in the sky? What would that happen? And then someone said, what would happen? I said, you're right. What would happen? Would that be quantifiable? If it said something, and then the truckers, then it was timing was perfect. And it ran outside and people started running outside. And then it said, the first one said, do you believe in love? And it was in purple. And it was a question mark. It was written in kind of half cursive, half print. It took about 18 minutes to put that in the sky. And then that dissipated. And then the next one said, good job. And I said, I'm wondering, Berkeley, maybe we should have tested this out somewhere other than Berkeley, because they said maybe there's like a 50-50 split on the impact. And I said, that's still quantifiable, though. I was talking out loud because all the, and I said, here's the thing. Who is that person writing in the sky? Who is she? Her name is A.E. Skywriting. You could probably find her on, I don't know if there's a skywriting forum. And, people were cheering. And they said, it'd be the community you want to see. Something, I don't know. She started winging it, like writing stuff. It's not easy being green. That was another one. That was in green. I liked that one. And then she underlined it. And eventually, everybody dissipated. And I headed back down to the marina. And she returned, flush with skywriting. Like a thin layer of sweat on her skin from being in the sky, from writing, from concentrating. And she said, my voicemail is like, she goes, 86 voicemail messages. I said, how many are from the FAA or the other one, the FTC or whatever the heck? She said 12. She said 18 are from truckers, ask, like checking my status. And she said the rest of them are from researchers wondering, and a couple of podcasters that don't do sleep podcasts. And I said, well, there you go. And she said, and then there's more like requests for, birthday parties and stuff like that. She said, it's cost prohibitive is the thing. And I said, not if we get the right grant. And they said, well, you're on your path. You're on your way. And I said, I got to be on my way. But I said, she said, of course, there's a chance of me letting you sit in the seat, like the co-pilot seat while you skywrite. And I said, exactly. That's what I was hoping for. And she said, what should we write? And I said, East Bay, you got to write hella. I think that's pretty much what I said, even though it's like 6 years old too. I said, I think that's what you got to write. And she did that. And then she listed, Oakland, Berkeley, Emeryville. It was cool. And then she just started doing curly cues. Then they said, hey, you got to get it. You know, your flight plan's no longer valid. And we landed. And she said, why don't you take the CB? And I said, you can't take the CB from your plane. And she said, well, she goes, one of the grants already went through. She goes, I'm getting a new plane. She said, like some tech company, you know, one of those tech billionaires already set it up. And I said, wow, holy, wow, woo. And so we parted ways. And then, you know, every few nights I would get on that CB. And the Red Baron would take to the airwaves, Channel 15, maybe. I don't know what channel it was. And it'd be breakering out there to all the truckers, to all my good buddies. Now I could say, breaker, good buddy. This is Red Baron thanking you for saving skywriting and for keeping someone's dreams going. Good night. All right, everybody. Hey, Scoots here with the Tuck You In message, and you'll be hearing on the pre-rolls, hopefully a fun game show version of this, and then the mid-rolls, a shorter version. But this is kind of like a message, decided to try to change the direction of things. And I've tried to be clear about this, but I want to be as clear as possible and do it in the spirit of sleepy joy and delight. So I'm going to run through, we've been talking about super listeners and supporting the show, but I want to be really specific about who does not need to support the show or even think about it kind of thing. Like, you don't need to support the show if kind of, but real, like this is real, like, in the sense, if you happen to be listening to this right now, and sometimes I realize my stress or my feelings around the sustainability podcast can leak through, right? And impact people inadvertently, and make you feel some kind of way. And I have to I want to right now take a, more active, caring hand in that. So if a part of you does speak up, and after I run through all this, and I'll be running through it, and maybe this will be the new direction we take things. When that part of you speaks up, say, no, Scoot says, he said he's not talking to me. If that part of you tries to make, because I have that part of me very strong in me, that makes you want to feel a word that sounds like Shane or Pilt, or any of that kind of stuff. So this one is a post-roll, Tuck You On post-roll, so I'll run through it slowly. But I do have it in front of me, so I'll also be trying to read. One, if you happen to be listening to this, if you're a new listener or you, like you're a person who's only listened to once in a while, right? You've only been listening less than 6 months. You don't need to support the show or even think about supporting the show. If you're not in a position to support the show, whether it's financial or you just you're not interested in supporting the show, like, you don't need to support the show. Don't worry. Like, it's great news that I want to be as clear, and I guess in this post roll, I can't be sleepy, joy, and delightful except like that. It's good news. You do not need to support the show. I mean, we still have to put those messages out there and stuff like that, but, it doesn't, if you can't afford to support the show, you're not interested, or you're new, you don't need to, right? And you could say it to yourself if that comes up in those messages, because we still do have to ask, right? But we're not asking you. So you can say, Scoots isn't asking me. Like the good news or the great news is like, returning this thing. So you're welcome here. And yeah, I guess I'm not guessing. It's not a great time to apologize, but it's like, me, when I get, me trying to, I had to find my way to this, right? Of, hey, I guess I guess I do need to apologize because I had to find my way here of like, I don't want to put those feelings on people that you can't support the show. You're not interested in supporting the show. If you're new, don't worry about it. And the thing is, because the
there are listeners who do care, I care and listeners care. And those are the people that support the show. And I've gotten enough messages. We did something with Sleep With Me Plus where people said, yeah, I support the show, not just for me. And they want the podcast to be there for you. Like this is real, that they care. And that we're holding you, that the podcast in this quest to make sure Sleep With Me will be around, for you. So again, I think the tool in this example is hey, Scoots isn't talking to me. And by the way, other listeners have said explicitly they have me. I guess this is more apply, new listener, you're kind of come from a place, why would I support a podcast that I'm new to, right? So if you just happen to be listening, this is more of the people in those other places, that it's okay. It's more than okay to be in those places. And that I've actually been in those places too. And now the other side of it is, I'm going to run through everything, but yeah, if you're not in those groups, right. And you say, well, I didn't realize that, I want to be the one providing comfort, supporting comfort. I want to be a part of this thing for those people you're talking about and whoever you're talking about coming up. You could join us. So I'd love it. But not if you're not in a position to support the show or a place where you'd want to support the show or you're new. Also, the other group I'll talk about now that I was going to record last is if it the idea of supporting the podcast, or changing how you do things, or taking those steps or whatever takes away from the show, right? You don't need to support the show. If it stressses you out, thinking about going through the steps to support the show, or it just seems here's the thing. I think I even put this in some of this. If it's Scoot said, just too much to ask me right now, I'm not asking you. It is the truth. I'm asking someone else. It's too much for me right now, Scoots. I don't know if I'm in those two groups, but it just feels like too much, or it's not the right time. I see you and I hear you. And and you can say to that party that says Scoots is talking to you, and no, he's not. He said it explicitly. If you say in your head, no, it's too much to that's just too much for me. Can't see myself doing that. It's just outside of believe me, again, I'm not saying this. I'm saying it because I can relate to. I've been in those places, or I continue to be in those places in different aspects of my life. So I can relate, and I'm saying it clearly now, as clearly as I can. When I'm asking for support of the show, I'm not asking you to support the show. It's okay. We have you. This isn't a bit or a reverse thing. It's the truth. You okay? So I just want to rest with that one. Now, the next two groups are probably not listening right now, but just in case you are, and it's funny, I'm trying to figure out how to word it, in the mid-roll and the pre-roll. But if you're a regular or average, I realize no one's average that listens to the show, but the way most people listen to the show is what I'm using as an average. And here's the thing. If you're like most listeners, you listen to the show while you're going through a tough time, right? Whether it's different phases or seasons of your life, and maybe you listen for a couple months at a time, and maybe during those months you listen to 2 episodes a week, maybe you listen to more episodes a week. But you use Sleep With Me like a tool when you need it every couple of years, because what I've seen happen is people getting through high school, then getting into or through those tough times in college, then their first job, and getting used to that, then their next phases of their life, and then their first baby, or other phases of life that come on us unexpectedly that we're not quite ready for. and we need some ease and comfort in the deep, dark night, and you just come and go when you need the show, you're actually covered by the sponsors and the listener support, because you listen, you start the show, you wind down during the intro, and then you fall asleep during the story, and the episode stops playing at the end of the episode, or you're in one of those small groups that uses a sleep timer. That's a one group and most of you don't mind the ads at all, and because the ads, that's the main, like that kind of listening is what the sponsors cover, right? And maybe you check out the sponsors, maybe you don't, or maybe you're like, yeah, I'm totally fine with the ads, or you say, well, I realize that, or whatever, a lot of work goes into the show. The ads are necessary. A lot of people love the ads, but some people might be like, well, yeah, it's necessary. I get it. Especially for that kind of listening. You don't need to support the show if you're just listening during these phases of life for a few months at a time. Again, we have you covered. Now, if those changes in your life are big enough that you want to support the show during that time, that's fine. Or you can support the show with one-time support on Sleep With Me Plus if you scroll down. But you don't need to, and you don't need to feel like, don't get caught up in I can't, there's no way for me to target the ads to just super listeners, right? Who are in a place to support the show. So I just have to ask on every episode to get through to the people that are in a place. But yeah, if you only listen once in a while when things are tough or when you need the show or it's baffling, you say, okay, I got Sleep With Me. I'll listen to that this week, or this month, or even these 6 months. We've got you. You do not need to support the show like we have you. So those are some of the people I wanted to get through to. And then again, if you say, I'm not in those groups, and you're just curious, but you say, wow, it would sound, if again, this is only for people not in those groups. If you say, I want to be a part of this thing, I want to be a part of I want to send comfort across the deep, dark night to all those groups of people you just mentioned. I mean, there's people dealing with loss, dealing with their first child, their first job, being out on their own for the first time, a big exam, a big life change. People who would love to support the show but just can't, just not possible for them one way or the other. People that love the podcast so much, they get so much out of it, and new listeners who this podcast might change their life. Yeah, I want to be a part of that. I would miss the show if it was gone for me and for those people, because I'm not in any of those groups really, or I'm not sure. Maybe, if you're sure, then think about supporting the show on Sleep With Me Plus. But if you're not sure, I wouldn't do it. I'm kind of in one of those groups. Sounds like a bit much for me. Don't worry about it. We got you. But if you want to be a part of this thing and you're not in those groups, that's who I'm trying to get through to. And it is I wish there was maybe one day, years from now, I don't think there'll be the technology to do that just because the Sleep With Me is so unique. But I want to try to be as clear as I can and as caring as I can, because my joy is to keep this podcast going for everybody and to bring sleepy joy and delight. And sometimes I've felt in the past, I'm like, how are these things feel like they're in opposition? How can I bring them into unity? And so this is an experiment, which I hope works, and I hope helps us bring things back into unity. So thanks. This is good news. It's good news. We've got you. And you can say to that voice, Scoots isn't talking to me. He's talking to another listener, not to me. So I'm going to listen to the show. This show's for me. This is it's not so much as a gift as the collective goodwill of all of us kind of, I don't know. So thanks.